Hi, this is Kristy Moore. I've been selling real estate for 12 years. Our team of highly trained professionals, along with our marketing plan, has sold over 700 homes all over the DC market. And this is how we do it. Hi, this is Kristy, and today we're going to talk about how to convert buyer internet leads. So the first thing to understand about buyer internet leads is that generally these people are very early in the process. So these are your pay-per-click leads, your Google leads, and your Facebook leads. I'm not talking about direct inquiries from Zillow or Realtor.com or your website. These are people that are searching online, or they're what I consider inactive leads. So they're not actively looking at things, they're just kind of browsing. They see a house on the internet and they just randomly click a link. So they're probably thinking about buying, but they're not really that far along in the process. So it's the first thing to understand, because you want to make sure you come from a place of customer service and not a hard driving kind of sales call. So when you call these leads, it's important to just make sure that they understand that they were on your site and see if there's any way that you can help them out. So what you do is you just say, "Hi, this is Kristy with Local Expert Realty. And the reason I'm calling is because you were browsing our website and I noticed that you were looking at properties in Fredericksburg. Is Fredericksburg the only area that you're looking in, or are you looking in other areas as well?" The reason why you want to start with the location is because it's the easiest thing for people to open up to you about. It's also a really light question. You're not asking them if they're qualified. You're not asking them if they're working with an agent. You're just asking them where exactly they're looking. So at this point, some people might brush you off. Some people might say, "Oh, I'm just curious," or "Oh, I was just looking," or "Oh, I just randomly clicked on a link," or they might even tell you that they weren't looking at all, that "Why are you calling me?" So depending on their response is how you're going to answer. So if they're just passively looking, or they're just curious, or they're not really that motivated, or they don't even sound like they're that motivated, then you want to make sure that you know what their timing is. Because again, these are generally longer term prospects, and you don't want to be harassing people if they're a year or two out, or even 6 months for that matter. So the next question would be, okay, well, I was just curious. I mean, if you were to move, when do you think that might be? And that's a really good universal question that you can ask people, no matter what they say. If they say, "I'm just curious," or "I was just looking," because you're asking, well, if you were to move. I mean, if you had to guess, if you had an ideal time frame, when would that be? So it's a very light question as far as what their timing is. If you ask them something a little more direct, like, "Are you moving in the next 3 to 6 months, or are you moving in a year?" They may not be as open to answering that question. You can also say, "Well, I want to make sure that, we give you the right service, and I want my motivation to match your motivation. So would you be looking in the next 7 days, 7 minutes, 7 months?" Something along those lines. That's a really light question. The most important thing that you can get as far as their information is their timing. Because again, you do want your motivation to match their motivation. You don't want to be calling somebody every day if they're a year out. You also don't want to not be calling somebody every day if they're looking in the next week. So that's really important to find out what their timing is. The other thing is you want to find out what their motivation is. So I'm just curious, are you renting right now, or do you already own a home? Because if they're renting, they probably have a lease that's expiring, which would be their primary motivation. If they have a house to sell, that allows you to dig into deeper questions as far as why they're looking for another house. So let's just say that they're renting. So if they're renting right now, then you would say, "Oh, okay, great. So are you month to month, or do you have a lease that's going to expire?" And depending on what they say, we'll give you a good idea as far as what their timing is. Most people will say, "Oh, I have a lease that runs out in the next 6 months," or "Oh, I'm month to month," or I'm renting for the next 3 months. So that will give you a good idea as far as what their timing is. It's also really good to know where they're currently living, even if they're renting, so that you know if they're planning on looking in the same area, or if they're expanding their search to other areas. So I'm just curious, if you were to move, I mean, would you be staying in the area that you're renting in right now, or where you own a home right now? Or are you looking to expand your search into other areas? You've already asked the location question up front, but it's also good to find out, again, where they currently live and what other areas interest them. The next thing that you want to find out is if they currently have an agent. So a really good way to ask that question is to find out how they've been looking at homes. So I was just wondering, how have you been looking at homes? Are you looking online? Have you gone to open houses? Or are you looking at anything in person at this point? And based on what they say, will give you a good indication of whether or not they're working with an agent. You don't really want to ask them directly, are you working with an agent? It's kind of like if you're at the bar and somebody asks you if you have a boyfriend and you don't really want to talk to this person because you don't really know them. You're just going to say you have a boyfriend even if you don't, just to get them to go away. So it's a good idea to ask them in a roundabout way whether or not they're working with an agent. So if they're already looking at houses in person, most likely they have an agent that they're working with. If they're just looking online, then you can ask them a little bit more directly if they're working with an agent. So based on that answer, whether or not they're working with an agent, then the next thing you want to know is whether or not they're approved. So I was just curious, do you know what your budget is? Have you talked to a lender yet? Do you know how much you can qualify for? So those are really good questions to ask to see where they're at in the process. Again, most of these people are very early in the process. So they probably haven't talked to a lender. You can definitely send them some lender information to help them along with the process. But if they sound like they're going to be doing something within the next 3 to 6 months, you definitely want to ask for the appointment. And the reason why you want to ask for the appointment is because if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. So you might as well ask. And then based on their answer, you're going to know if this is a follow-up, a longer-term follow-up, or if it's somebody that you can meet with now. So a great reason to meet with people is to let them know that you have access to properties that they don't have access to, as well as educating them on the process and setting up a time to look at homes. People want options when they're buyers. They want to know that there's inventory that they can look at and that you have access to things that they don't. They also want to look at houses. Most buyers don't want to meet with us as agents. Let's just be honest about that. So you have to give them a reason to meet with you. So a great thing to say is, well, you know what? I think based on what you're telling me right now, it would be a great idea for us to meet. That way we can go over the market so you understand exactly what's going on in the market. We can go over our process as far as helping you not only find a house, but make sure you don't make a lot of costly mistakes throughout the process. We also have access to off-market properties that no one else has, and we can set up a time to look at homes. How does that sound? That gives them everything that they want, so they're going to be more inclined to meet with you. If they don't want to meet with you just now, then make sure you ask permission to follow up. So would it be okay if I followed up with you at a later time? Okay, great. When would be a good time for me to follow up? You always ask for permission to follow up and then ask them when to follow up. The reason is because some people will tell you they're a year out, and then when you ask them when to follow up, they say to call them in 2 weeks. Now, why would they ask you to call them in 2 weeks if they're not ready for another year? It's most likely because they lied to you up front, which happens because you're a stranger and you're calling them over the phone. So as you get farther along in the conversation and people open up more and more and you get more information from them, the more honest they're going to be and the more open they're going to be with working with you. So thanks for watching my video. If you have any questions, feel free to call, text, or email me.